Good evening and welcome to the coffee table. Today is Sunday, 23rd of December, and we have an interesting subject of which everybody, has been talking about, and it seems to be the most talked about subject currently, and it is corruption. But we're going to look at corruption in a totally different manner. We're not going to look at it in a partisan manner. We're going to look at it in an apolitical manner and try to understand what does it really mean, right? So, Doc, corruption.
Faisal, before you get too serious, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you also.
I mean, this is the end of the year.
Yes, I know.
We can be a little light.
So we won't be able to do it on the 25th, so yes. But Merry Christmas to all our friends.
Celebrate. There are many Pakistani Christians. Let's at least
absolutely, I agree with you. I agree with you. So Merry Christmas to you.
And you've chosen a dismal subject for corruption.
Not really. Why is it a dismal subject? It's something that affects all of us. So why should we be shy of talking about it?
I know our Prime Minister is not.
Yeah.
Our Prime Minister is talking about it every day. He's made a personal vendetta, you were telling me, since before he came into politics?
Yes, I mean, I saw a clip in which he was being interviewed, and this is before he entered politics. So he's sitting with his wife, with Jemima, and I think the question was put to him whether he had any political ambitions. And his answer was that I would love to do something for the people, but politics is too corrupt. So I don't want to get my hands dirty. That was the perspective.
And he has come in with an agenda to wipe out corruption from Pakistan.
Is that possible? Right?
I salute him for it.
Yeah, I think we all salute him for it. I think nobody can disagree with that. But the question is it really possible in the current political structures we have, the current structures of governance we have? How is it going to happen? Because it has so many dimensions. It's not just about, commissions on big deals or, dipping into the public exchequer in one way or the other. It's much, much more insidious, more deeply rooted, right? So how do we address that? How do we define it first, right? So, just the conversations we have, right? Your definitions of corruption again, right, go a little beyond what normally you would find in the Webster or the Oxford Dictionary. So let's touch on that.
I think corruption, to my mind, as an economist, is very simple. The market is working.
Yeah.
We are doing a television program. The television program is sold to people. Right. Advertisers pay for it.
Yeah.
It brings in a certain audience. The audience is measured. And there's a market in television programs.
Sure.
Now, where corruption would come in is that if some advertiser was able to get his own cousin or relative on the program or buy something from the television station, do something underhanded.
Right.
Corruption has to be something underhanded in the marketplace.
So underhanded in the marketplace.
Underhanded in the marketplace to gain certain favors and to take certain advantages from the process of the market, so that it can be.
Isn't that very esoteric? I mean, it's pretty abstract.
No, it's not. Think about it. If supposing the railway department had to put in a railway line.
Right.
I get the contract. And I get the contract by paying.
I get the contract through what? Through a public tender?
Through paying a bribe. Public tender would be fine, would be okay. Right?
Yeah, but public
tenders happen.
All government spending is done through PEPRA rules, right? So there is public tendering, but we still keep hearing about corruption.
But public tenders can be rigged. My friend.
So now we are saying, okay, the rules, the framework is there, but it's not working. It's being compromised.
The framework can always be compromised. I pay a certain bribe, somebody tells something in my favor, puts you out of the contract, I get the contract, I go there, put in substandard rails, a train crashes, kills people.
Yeah.
That's what corruption causes.
That's the consequence.
That is the real, but the problem was the corruption, where I got substandard rails in.
Yeah.
Or let's say if you were putting up
but isn't that like the space shuttle or the next rocket?
Exactly.
You give the contract to the lowest bidder.
Yeah.
So is that one definition of it? That the contract has to go to the lowest bidder?
Now there's two things here which are very important that you of all people will understand much better. I remember I was in Sri Lanka and I was restructuring the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. And one day I had a conversation with the governor and I asked him, I said, look, Governor, how would you handle a mistake?
Right.
He says, I would be very upset. I would, hurt the person or whatever. I said, Governor, you must differentiate between mistakes, serious mistakes, or malfeasance. Malfeasance is where things go wrong, where I've done something deliberately wrong. If I made a mistake, that's okay. It's the same thing on corruption. If I'm doing something that is a mistake, I've made an innovation and I make a mistake, that's fine. But where corruption comes in, it's a deliberate attempt to do something to benefit yourself or somebody else that you know is going to cause harm. It's not a mistake. It's pure malfeasance. It's pure, something wrong. And we do have a lot of that in Pakistan.
Okay.
We agree.
So let's go back.
We agree.
Let's dial back to 1947, right? And start our journey from there. Here was a young country, right? Lots of euphoria, freedom, and big problems, right? So dealing with a large number of refugees, not enough money in the kitty, all those things. How is it that at that time we were able to manage things? How is it that we didn't have the same level of corruption, or did we have it even then?
I think if you look back, there are two separate things going on here. The youthful vigor of a young country, you will remember, where we used to sing all those national songs patriotically, stand in line and sing. I think there was something there. There's a certain magic to it, there's a certain charm to it. And we did have that in the early days. There was a certain desire to get things done. And I think it kind of showed itself in the songs of Noor Jahan in the 65 war or something. There was a patriotism, there was something. But I don't think you can say that there was no corruption even then. If you recall the incidents, we've never had an investigation, but if you recall the incidents of evacuee property, there was a lot of grab and take, right? And that in itself was the beginning of. But why stop there? Go back to the 1857 mutiny or something, right? Or somewhere. I mean, there was a canal system built in this country. And when the canal system was built, new land was reclaimed as irrigation came in. And that land was in the hands of the colonial masters to give.
They dished it out, jaggirs.
They dished it out on what ground? Where was the merit? What was the purpose of dishing it out, right? Purpose was loyalty.
So it's infection in our DNA, is it?
So there was but even go back further. The Mughal Empire, what was it? Basically, or even before that, all the empires were basically based on local cronies who would keep law and order, and they would get rewarded.
Cronyism is always
cronyism is a very important part of corruption. Right? I would say corruption is a very, very old and tested system in the world. It works everywhere, even today. As we were discussing earlier, I quite frankly think it's not that there's no corruption in the West.
No, there is.
They've named it differently. They call it lobbying. They've called it PACs. That's also corruption, so right? They reward people PACs, for being there. PACs is a political action committee.
Let's tell our audience what the PACs actually mean. So political action committees, right? And these are lobbyists that go out to raise money from the public for the interest of a particular congressperson.
Sorry, there's difference. Not necessarily from the public.
Right.
From the corporates.
Oh, from the corporates.
From the rich guys.
Sure.
Right?
True.
And then the point is, in the bargain, policy is skewed in the direction. Case in point, the NPR or the cigarettes.
Right,
National...
absolutely.
Sorry, not NPR. What is it? National
Rifle Association.
Right?
That is the...
NRA.
That's the first amendment,
Sorry, NPR is a good thing. National Rifle Association.
My right to bear arms.
And please tell me, that is pure lobbying money. And what is the result?
And no matter how many kids get killed because somebody just went berserk with an assault rifle that they could pick up as easy as buying a carton of milk, right? So the NRA is such a powerful...
And every day, virtually, there are people killed by a gun guy gone wild, right? But yet, the lobbying group wins out every time. No congressman has the courage to
go back and say we need to amend
Now that's legalized. But hey, they do more harm than a policeman taking a bribe here does less harm than that. Or for example, take cigarettes. The smoking lobby for decades
they fudge data.
Fudge the data. Right? To tell people that smoking was not as harmful as it was. They go out and corrupt kids. They actually hook kids onto cigarettes. And that we consider as kosher?
It isn't. But when we talk corruption, right, we normally kind of tie it up to public office. And we say, listen, we elected you to this public office. We elected you to do certain things in the interest of the public, right? You are a servant of the public. But you turn around and you start to build your perks and privileges. You start to dip into the public exchequer. You start to extract value for yourself individually, right? That's where our definition of corruption sits. Is that the correct definition? And that creates polarization also. That creates political polarization. everybody is going to say, no, my party leader is not corrupt. My party is not corrupt. Right? So situational morality kicks in. So people who would be very normal, very sensible people, suddenly start to defend the indefensible also. So what do we do? How do we make it incumbent on people, right, to also understand? I mean, you just talked about the policeman, right, and saying taking a bribe. But if I was aware of the rules and the laws, and I didn't break any rules and laws, why would I give any money to that policeman? I wouldn't. So as an individual citizen, if I'm aware of what my responsibilities are and what my rights are, if I've not jumped a red light or I've not crossed a line, why should I pay anything?
That's if you have rights.
Yeah. Okay, so...
In Pakistan,
yeah,
unfortunately, I think most parts of the world, our rights are defined in the constitution. Right?
True.
But a right is only a right if there's somebody to enforce it.
Yes.
Remember, Faisal, I mean, you and I mean, I have no ability to fight. If somebody comes and holds a gun to my head today, I will have to give what I have, right?
Most of us won't.
I'm only relying on the state to protect me. My right to roam around freely and not be hassled depends on the policeman's ability to protect me.
True.
Not my ability to protect me. But if the policeman is not there, if I call emergency, 112 and he doesn't show up, what do I do? And if he shows up and he's bribed, what do I do? So you're absolutely right. Corruption is when officialdom is through money stoked in favor of somebody.
Yeah.
So officialdom, because I pay them a
which
bribe,
is violate of the constitution,
will decide for me, not you.
Yeah.
And it is violative of every law, but it happens. So what do people do? What have people done through history? If you think about it, the king's word was the law in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
What did they do? They developed the rule of law.
Yeah. But Magna Carta, right, to start with.
But
saying,
what is the rule
contract.
of law? We don't think what is the rule of law?
Yeah.
Rule of law.
Rule of law to me means that the weakest must be protected by society and by the state, right? And that is why laws are formulated. Because the powerful ones will always step over the line because they have the ability to step over the line. So that is why the laws are
Fukuyama
formulated.
puts an interesting twist on it. You're right, and as far as you went, but he says another interesting thing. He said the most powerful entity in any country is the king, the sovereign, or the state.
Right.
Ultimately, the sovereign has the right to kill somebody. You and I don't have the right to kill anybody.
Yeah, so they have
sovereign,
they have presidential immunity.
Sovereign can kill anybody. Sovereign can actually hang people, electrocute them, etc. And they do all the time. You know that, right?
Yeah.
He said the biggest thing, the biggest definition of the rule of law is where the sovereign himself must obey laws.
Obey the laws. Must be subject to the laws.
So there is a law which says, hey, you can't arrest Faisal without a warrant.
Yeah.
Law says you can't hold Faisal more than 24 hours without
habeas
charging
corpus,
him.
right?
Habeas
You
corpus,
have to produce the
So
corpus.
all those laws are there. And that's the beginning of ending corruption. Rules, laws that are clear and transparent, that you and I understand.
Yeah.
Not that, and that will require automatic consideration, not just that, judge
So
can
no
decide
taking notice.
No taking notice.
CM has taken notice, PM has taken notice.
Yeah.
It should be happening as a consequence.
Automatic.
Yeah.
I mean, my rights have been infringed. Something must trigger.
Yeah.
Something must happen. It's like a computer switch.
Yeah.
Must go down.
Sure.
Say his right has been infringed.
Yeah.
The state will move.
If this, then that. Right?
Period.
So
right?
it's as
And if
simple
the
as that.
state is at fault, I will be compensated.
Yeah.
Right? But it's easier said than done. These systems are very hard
I
to
know,
make.
but where, so is it
It took
politics?
the West 300 years to make them.
Is it the political structure? If you're saying, well, corruption has always been there, one form or the other, right? Whether we dial back 500 years or go back 1,000 years, we will still find that somebody taking advantage of other people or taking advantage of a whole society. But let's look at it within our own constitutional, let's say, framework. Because supposedly we do have a constitution.
Yeah.
And that constitution is supposed to protect us, right? So we have certain rights under that constitution. But none of those are being, or let's say some of them are not being delivered. And we find constantly that the money that we pay in terms of taxes and all is not being used for the purpose for which the money is being paid in. Right? So what happens? So what do we do? How, do we change the laws? Do we change the political structure? Do we, to me, if you can't contest in an election, right, without having billions of rupees or even hundreds of millions of rupees, then to me that is a corrupt political structure. right? It does not allow the common person.
I think the question you're raising are very wise and very important, and unfortunately we don't discuss them enough. I think the answer lies in developing systems. I'll take you back, let's say last century. If you think about it, or even before that, at the, let's say 1832, before the British first parliamentary reform. There was things called rotten boroughs. Where people would get elected because their father or grandfather had to.
Absolutely.
They were pocket constituencies.
So it was
hereditary. My father was a duke or count. I will get elected, and so will.
So I go into parliament.
And the second thing was everybody could take a bribe. Who cared? People made tons of money.
The English Nawabs, right, who came to India and made mass fortunes.
Tons of money and went back, right? But the good thing in England was that there was a realization. They began to reform. And that's why the 19th century, if you recall this famous book, Hobsbawm, we called it the age of reform. Right? It was the age of reform. They reformed everything. And one of the big things that they did was they built the civil service and the judicial system. That was the keeper of the reform. Right? That was the keeper of the law, so to speak. And the Parliament had very little influence there. They built it. Now you come down to the US, for example. New York, etc., a huge amount of corruption in the late
Chicago
late 19th century, Chicago, everywhere. They passed a civil service Pendleton attack, I think it's called Pendleton bill or something, in 1870, making the American civil service independent of politics.
Of the politicians.
And giving them the custody of keeping the rules. What we need is a system that is totally professional and totally independent of the parliament and the politician. Like I remember when I was in the government, the politicians were always in my room asking for favors.
So we're going to take a break here. So we'll come back to this. Right? I think this is a very, very interesting juncture where we are. So let's take a break. We just take a quick short break and we're going to be back with you on this one. Thank you for staying with us. So we were discussing before we went away to the break of what corruption is and how it affects a country, what happens with the governance structures. And what we had got to was talking about the 19th century and how it was known as the period of reform. So you had reforms in the British government, in the British Parliament, and then you had reforms in the later half of the 19th century within the US government structures. So Doc, you were talking about this, so let's pick it up from there.
You see, the thing is that in both these countries, they gradually developed depoliticization of systems. Politics is a part of human life, as we discussed. And yes, we need forums to take care of our politics. Those forums are parliament. Those forums are, the political parties, etc. But we don't allow forums to enter the executive, the politics to enter executives. Once a decision has been made by the parliament or whatever, the executive then should depoliticize, should implement. Just like take a corporation. You can decide all the politics of the board or the owners in the board. But the staff is kept totally protected
separated from the
politics.
Board, right?
Same thing here. What they did was they went very carefully and depoliticized those systems, which Trump is trying to change today. But those systems remain out of politics. And for example, things like what we discussed earlier, money flows, finance. Finance then becomes, once the parliament is passed, it's a technical issue. Those are technical issues. Federal Reserve is independent, technical. Same thing, once the budget is passed, then it's a technical issue. It's not a political issue. Once it's passed, it's over. Right? You only pass the budget politically because, hey, there's some give and take there. But otherwise, there's no give and take. In terms of how I'm going to build a bridge, there's no give and take. The choice on building the bridge is fine. You can decide whether you want to build a bridge.
A bridge has to come in here.
Once the bridge is decided that you want it between this city and that city, that could be politics, but not otherwise, right? Similarly, if you want to build the internet, that's a technical issue. It's not a political issue.
Schools, hospitals, roads.
As much as possible, you want to depoliticize these things. Where we made a mistake is we made every MNA get into the system. He should not get into it. He's a legislator. He's not a spender. Right? So that's it. The second thing is, technocrats, for example, must have the capacity. Bridge building is not an easy job. We must have technocrats who are capable of understanding bridge building and not just simply say, hey, I can wing it, no problem. I can build a bridge, I can supervise it, etc. No, it is a very technical job, has to be done technically. The third thing is judiciary, which is watching, or the parliament which is watching. Parliament, for example, its job is to have hearings like you see in the US, with their televised hearings, or in Britain. They must conduct hearing. What is a hearing? Hearing is a review. They must look at the bridge. How was it built? They must look at the mechanics and the thing. But then they must have the expertise to do it. Third thing, if the court gets that case, they must also have the technical expertise to look at it. But even more important, the media must be professional as well looking at it. But even before the media, the universities must be looking at it.
But media is polarized, our judiciary is polarized.
They're too politicized.
So all these institutions are actually politicized.
I mean, take a look at this. Why do your evening shows have a politician from each political party? Who thought up
Nobody's going to step back. Everybody's going to defend their position.
In the rest of the world, politicians pay to get on shows.
That's true.
They should pay to get on shows. Why the hell are they giving a free ride? Right? So we politicize the media. People learn nothing. All they see is the decibel level rising, people calling each other names. You did this, you did this. That's strange. Secondly, you politicized every political office, administrative office.
Okay, one of my observations is that we do not have enough access to information. As a citizen, I should know what's happening in my government. I should know what's happening with my taxes. Why am I denied that access to information? Nobody seems to give me access. Let's take the basic land revenue officer, the Patwari, right? He is the custodian of data, right, on land, on ownership and all that. And we all know, and we now use it as a term, we use Patwari as a term for corruption, right? And saying hoarding of this and hoarding of that, right, is Patwari thinking. Why is it like that? Why haven't we been able to change it? It's not difficult at all. In today's age, information should easily flow. If I want to protect it...
Yes, if you had the information.
If I had the information. If I, as an individual citizen, had
Who has the information?
The officials.
Do they?
Yeah.
Do they?
They're supposed to.
I don't think they do. I think the tragedy is the colonials gave us a system which we have kept alive. We have not changed it. But we've got rid of one of the most important aspects of their system. If you go to the India Office Library in UK, you see the old colonial bureaucracy's archives.
Everything was recorded.
Right? They were very good at collecting information, developing data.
You can't run an empire without that. How would you be able to run an empire?
If you go today to the Education Ministry or the Health Ministry, they hardly have data. Because it's not developing data. What's happened is that we've politicized the bureaucracy so much, bureaucracy has forgotten its fundamental role. To my mind, the fundamental role of the bureaucracy is collecting data, monitoring systems, informing the executive and the bureaucracy what is happening. On the basis of that data, trying to figure out how to rejig policy. Policy needs rejigging every once in a while because things change. Like, for example, mobile phones have come in. We need to really reimagine policy, right? Technology is coming. We need to reimagine. But we can't do it unless we know what's happening. But our bureaucracy is so politicized now, we don't want to do it. Now, related to this also is a question, why are we so worried about corruption? Yes, we are 117 on the Transparency
117 on the Transparency International Index, and this is 2017.
So we are only worried because we are low on that list? Why are you worried?
No, I'm worried on a different...
Why is the Prime Minister worried?
I'm worried about the fact that I pay taxes, right? And I pay taxes for a purpose. I pay taxes because I want a better society, I want a better environment, I want more protection for me and my children. I want access.
Well, you got the metro.
The metro...
You got the M2.
But is the metro, right? So all I hear about the metro is how much money was made, right? All I hear is records were burned.
So it's jealousy.
Right? So, no, it's not even jealousy. So I don't like the idea that the money that I'm paying in for a certain purpose...
Let me rephrase the question. Do you really think...
buying apartments and, bank accounts and whatever.
Do you really think we are 117 on that list? And 117 means that we are amongst the bottom of the barrel.
We are one of the most corrupt.
One of the most corrupt countries in the world, right?
That's what it's supposed to be.
That's what it's supposed to be. What is the Transparency International measuring And how are they measuring it?
Yeah, that is an interesting one. How do they construct this index, right? Do they look into everything that's happening, or is it just some reports that they gather and they say, this is the index, this is where you sit, right?
They largely do a perception survey.
So they ask people.
They ask people, do you think your country is corrupt? How many days? That kind of thing. How much
That's the
money
worst
do you
possible
pay?
way of
How
doing
many
things.
do you think? Whatever. And people give that answer, and then they look at whatever media, etc., and they compile an index. And on the basis of that, they say that we've got that these countries rank in corruption. So who do you think ranks number one, number two? I forget now, but who are the top countries?
I would imagine Japan, and I would imagine some Scandinavian countries.
Scandinavian countries on top.
Would be on the top, right? So
after that come some other European countries, right? Then comes Japan or something. US is somewhere in that, in the not the top, but in the...
Okay, let's take your earlier analogies, and if you look at Scandinavia, right? Now these were societies that used to raid and trade, right? That's what they used to do. They used to go and decimate other communities, right? And that is how they moved forward. So they were thoroughly corrupt at one time, right? They did not, they had no concept of human rights, fundamental rights, none of those things. Their rulers were equally corrupt, right? Everything was of them. They could decide life and death. They could decide...
That was more than 1,000 years ago.
Whatever, right? So how have they changed? And why haven't we changed? And when I'm saying we, I'm talking about a very large part of the world, right? That, lies in this index and says the most corrupt countries, right? So, that kind of thing. Because corruption affects me. Because corruption means that everything that is supposed to be to my benefit is not to my benefit, right? So, jealousy, not really.
That's a very passive approach.
Why is it a passive approach?
You're just saying that, hey, I don't want somebody to make money at my expense while I enjoy myself. While I enjoy myself.
Well, I have the right to enjoy myself if I'm...
Well, let me tell you two things. For a start, the transparency index, as I said, is measured...
It's perception.
It's perception.
Okay.
The second very important thing about transparency is, and I did this a long time ago, if you look at their index, and we do some analysis, I find that two things become very important there. One is ethnicity, which is the more European you are, the less corrupt you are.
Right.
The second thing is that it's called per capita GDP, wealthy.
Yeah.
So the wealthy and the whiter people are less corrupt than the poorer and the darker people.
Okay.
I find that a little troubling.
It is. It is very troubling.
It is a little troubling.
But is that the true picture? If we were to do quantitative, let's say, studies, would we arrive at a different matrix?
I mean, this is an interesting question. The industry for making these indices lies in the West.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's well funded through donor money, which we discussed yesterday.
Right.
Right? So they fund this and they come up with a conclusion which seems very good, that their countries are less corrupt, these countries are more corrupt.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that we are not corrupt. Of course we are corrupt. But I would also point out, and I asked Transparency this once, and I'd like to ask them again.
Yeah.
Does lobbying figure in their calculation?
Yeah. Possibly doesn't.
For example, another thing, contracting, consulting. For example, you outsource things.
Sure.
Outsourcing now, as we've seen in the US, for example, they've outsourced prisons, and it's led to a huge increase in prison population.
It is.
Is that good? Is that bad?
Yeah.
Right?
Fine collection,
right?
Traffic fines, right?
So there's a huge problem.
You outsource it, and suddenly the fines
schools. They've outsourced schools to charter schools, and now they're discovering that those schools are not much better than the other public schools. So the issue is, if you are worried about how your money is spent, you should also be worrying about this.
Yeah,
should your money be spent to allow prisons to expand for private purpose?
Definitely not.
Right? Should your money be spent to allow private contractors to come out and fight expensive wars? I mean, we have to... So my point is, it's a difficult point.
My money should definitely not be spent to build barriers for the GORs.
That's also very correct. Very important. I'm with you. Clap, clap. I'm with you on that. Now the point is very simple. So we have to think deeply. What is corruption?
Yeah.
I share Imran's obsession with it. Yes, we should have a cleaner government, etc. But I'd go a little further. I'd say that, look, corruption is a byproduct of bad governance.
Yes, true.
When you had your northern European guys, the Scandinavians, the Vikings, doing all those things, their society was messed up. They were fighting each other, they were fighting the world, they were marauders, they had no order in their society, right?
Yeah.
And therefore, they went out fighting.
True.
Now, same thing happened in many societies that are in decay, and you see that in television serials now of the past.
Yes.
Decaying societies or societies that are kind of unstructured have this problem. I think Imran would do well, the Prime Minister, to shift his focus to developing better governance.
Yes.
Because what the West did, what the Europeans and the Northern Europeans and everybody did was develop better governance.
Yes.
Stopping corruption is a byproduct of better governance.
True, it is, without a doubt. And I believe that's the advice that he got from Mahathir Mohamad.
But the question is, no one knows what better governance is.
Yeah.
We use the term better governance without defining it. So we think corruption is easy to talk about. See, corruption is very easy to talk about, because when I mentioned to you somebody took a bribe, and oh my God, the train went off the tracks, you can immediately relate to it. We can immediately find the culprit. We can put him in jail. We can thrash him, whatever, you know. But it's more difficult to define. How did we lose 3 trillion rupees in energy?
Yeah. True.
But we did. We lost more money in energy than through corruption.
Yeah.
Yet,
but is that a consequence of corruption again? If we define corruption as a consequence of bad governance, then of course that 3 trillion is also a consequence of.
But there could be two factors there that we have to talk about, and that I hope we can get some research. I haven't seen any research.
Right.
And that's why I keep saying universities must be active.
Yes, they must.
We don't know whether it's corruption or whether it's just sheer stupidity or lack of capacity or inability to run the system.
I think that's a cop-out in the sense we're not looking the gift horse in the mouth and saying, okay, this money has gone somewhere because somebody has benefited from it. Right? The energy mix, the kind of energy mix we have, we keep hearing about, furnace oil.
But has anybody
gas.
thought about the energy mix? Is it a consequence of our actions, or was it pre-thought out?
I think it's a consequence.
Right? So that's ineptitude.
Yeah.
Why did we not think of the energy mix?
I don't think it's just inaptitude. It's also to the benefit of people.
Okay.
Right? That energy mix makes them richer. Right? So we have LNG terminals, we have an LNG contract, but we don't bring in the LNG, right? Because we want to bring in furnace oil.
So that's a very interesting thesis to study. And I wish somebody would do a few PhD theses on this. Was the energy loss of 3 trillion rupees a result of corruption or ineptitude?
Or was it inaptitude?
Right? Yeah. And I think...
To me, inaptitude is also corruption. If somebody is not competent, they should not be in that position. Right?
If you broaden the definition, then agreed. But I would like to keep it narrow for a while.
Okay.
Let's keep it there. But the point is, inaptitude also feeds on itself.
Yeah.
If I don't know how to run a company, I will run it to the ground.
Absolutely.
And if I have tons of money, my dad left me a ton of money, I will keep doing bad things, stupid things, and I'll keep making that happen. Now, this you in the corporate sector must appreciate it, right?
Yes.
That's how companies go into the ground.
So let's come back to this. We're going to take a break. So we'll take a short break and we'll come back to this. And we'll again pick up, on the definition of corruption and how do we see it and what can one do about it. Welcome back. So before we went off to the break, we were talking about what corruption is, how it's tied in with poor governance. So Doc, let's touch that. So let me reference a book, Why Nations Fail, right, which looks at various aspects of why a nation or why a society, why do institutions fail. And it says it isn't geography, it isn't culture, it isn't history. It is largely the political structure, right? Why governance fails. Because failure of a nation is failure of governance, right? At every level of governance. What is it that has gone wrong so much that the basic and the most talked about subject in Pakistan today is corruption?
I think because corruption is easy to talk about, as I said, it's easy to point fingers. Hey, it was because of this corruption, etc. Right. It is far more difficult to figure out how railway runs.
Right.
We talked about railways, right? Running railways is very complicated. Running PIA is a very complicated technocratic task.
Sure.
Right? We have politicized PIA to death.
Yeah.
PIA, for example,
and
has
railways
politicized everything.
Yeah.
Everything has been politicized.
Yeah.
We need to take politics out and make management a priority.
Right.
We have to manage. Merit is very important.
Right.
Merit, after merit, there's also another thing called monitoring.
Yeah.
Called review.
Sure.
called collecting
Accountability.
data. Data is a part of accountability, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
The monitoring and the review must be done by another bureaucracy, and they should also report. Just like if you look at the US or wherever, you see these crime movies, there's always an internal affairs department that is watching them.
True.
And anything happens, the internal affairs department turns up and does a review. And they will give a report to somebody. There will be a tribunal. All these processes have been set up in the world to make things happen. Right? Now, in that internal review process, there's no politics. No politician can enter, nobody can come into the system. Now, that's very important. We must make
So depoliticization of the police, depoliticization of the revenue services,
everything.
Of FBR,
everything.
Depoliticization of the investigation
universities.
Services. Right, universities.
Faisal, do you know the law says, in many universities, the laws say, and I don't know how the hell these laws get written, but they have been written and they are there. In our universities, they appoint politicians on the board. They appoint a nominee of the court on the board. They appoint 5 secretaries on the board. What is this nonsense? Why can't we have decent citizens on the board? Why can't we have universities properly monitored?
I would like to see taxpayers on the board.
Right, absolutely, they should be.
There was an exercise we had done a few years ago where a very smart young guy who had gone off to this international hackathon came back from there and built an application which pulled data from the FBR site. Right? And he had categorized. Right? He had categorized top 10 taxpayers in every district, right? In every category of business, right? Gender, he had done all those. It was very, very interesting stuff. Now, if I have the top taxpayer of the district involved in the planning for the district, I'll have less wastage, I will have less extraction, because he will not want the money that he's paying into taxes to be misused. Right? So governance is necessary. The other thing is even our structure of, even our political structure, right? Because we make the M&A the person, right, who's the custodian of the funds in the way, and saying so much has been disbursed to the M&As, or they've been given the access to those funds to spend as they want in their constituency.
That is against the Constitution.
That is against the Constitution.
The Article 77 or 78 something says the Parliament has only the right to pass a budget.
They cannot spend that money.
They should not be in any way involved with spending the money. They should not be seen near a bureaucrat's office asking for the money to be spent in a certain way. That should be illegal. But you see, the point is, we never get deeper into the situation. We need to think, we talk about governance and forget it. It's not governance. We need to build systems. Governance is a bunch of systems. As I gave you the police example. Other systems, for example, university. University appointments are made by the higher education secretary along with 2 or 3 industrialists. What is this nonsense? University appointments is a proper way of making, any appointment is a good way of making it. We have no way of making appointments. Lastly, we never review any department. If you think about it, I don't think you've seen any departmental reports, even audits, even though required by SCCP, are seldom done or done properly or reviewed anywhere. Right? We need serious review and reporting taking place.
So, I mean, these days, I think for me, the most hilarious thing is the 2 parties that were in power the last 10 years are now crying about the NAB laws. So what were you doing when you were in...
Because nobody reads these laws. They pass the laws without reading them. There is no proper discussion of the laws. Nobody knows who writes the laws. They rush through the system. We have not discussed it, debated it. In most countries of the world, the laws are debated in public. The university sector reads the laws, they discuss them, they talk about them. The bureaucracy is intimately involved in the laws. The bureaucracy knows the laws by heart. They know which section they're in charge of.
So do you see Imran Khan doing any of that?
Well, Imran Khan has made a lot of commitments, and I think he's an honest man. He's a very good man.
But honesty is not enough.
I think he wants to do good. I think he really wants to do it. Where his biggest problem is, where is the thinking? He's got a bunch of politicians, because that's not his fault. Our system is such that you have to walk in there with a bunch of electables. That's a very bad system.
I disagree with that.
It's a very bad system.
I disagree with that totally.
What do you think?
If you have a change in agenda, then you've got to change. Then you have to have enough
But you'll never get into power.
No.
Poor Imran showed that. He was there for 22 years trying very hard.
No.
He would not get a single vote.
That 22-year-old journey, you can break it down in bits and parts, right? And he is aware of that. He, in fact, laughs about it and says, I think in the 97 election, right, he didn't get elected.
He didn't get a single vote.
Right? He didn't get a single vote. And a lot of people thought that he would be a major force to reckon with. Didn't happen. Missed out on the, got one seat in the next election, right? Then missed out on the next election because he thought it was not the right thing to do.
But now the point is, he's come in with a bunch of electables.
Yes.
Right? So he's had to compromise. This is the ultimate Faustian bargain.
Sure.
He had to make a bargain with these guys.
Yeah.
And now he's being pulled in many different directions. I still have faith in him that he's capable of solving the problem. He's a fighter. Let's face it, he's a fighter.
That he is.
He doesn't give up,
competitive.
right?
Yeah.
He's very competitive and he's a fighter and he's willing to take tough decisions. He's willing to fight with everybody. So I think he'll make it. What he needs really is serious people who can think reform thoughts for him. And he has to have the ability in the parliament to make serious reform. And then
but he doesn't have enough...
he doesn't have enough votes. That's a big problem. But I think he gave us a hint the other day.
Yeah.
He said he might hold an early election.
Yeah.
All power to him.
Why not?
I think we need that, right?
I mean,
and if he gets...
Our analysts go absolutely berserk when they hear something like that. But the question is, why not? If I want...
I documented this once. In Japan, I think, if I remember right, 70% of the elections have been held before term.
Yeah.
In Britain, which we've copied, 34% of the elections, if I remember right, have been held before term.
Yeah.
Right? So why are we scared? Even in India, 30% of the elections have been held before time.
Yeah.
Right? If you forget, if you remember all the old elections, they were held about 2 years before. Right?
We have a political culture where extraction is the key.
So if
to extract, I need more time in government.
That's a key point. That's a key point.
Yeah.
So, and I wrote in my book, I said quite frankly, honestly, I would like the term reduced to 3 or 2 years. 3 years is more than enough. We don't need a 5-year term. 5-year term is too long. 3 years is more than enough. Let them have 3 years.
Well, the counter argument is not a long enough time. But
long enough for what? Long enough to extract?
That's true.
Long enough to extract? What are you doing?
That's true.
To make policies. Even 1 year is enough. Do you know in Switzerland, the term is 1 year? Switzerland is 1 year.
But those are cantons, right?
So fair enough.
Yeah.
But that's the local government, that's all. Local governments, the canton, that's a term for local government.
Yeah.
Now the question is, I think Imran is a fighter, he'll do it. Where we lack, Faisal, is ideas. Because we don't have a thinking community.
Yeah.
And that's your and my job. We failed.
Sure.
We have not got enough thinking communities. We have not got enough ideas. This is the program we did yesterday.
Yeah.
Aid has co-opted our thinking community.
Right.
We have no public intellectuals. We have no public debates. Right now, there should be at least 10 debates on the kind of reform that is necessary to get rid of corruption.
True.
Your TV anchors should be always talking about it. What do we do to instead of saying who should we jail? What should NAB do? That's not the point.
Who's going to jail? Who's not going to jail? They go to jail this week or next week or the week after that? Or
how are we going to improve a system which involves 3 or 4 things? One is data that you said. 2 is merit. 3 is autonomy of corporation, independence,
but there's intellectual honesty also.
Intellectual honesty,
unfortunately,
of course.
A lot of the politicians that we expected a lot from, are intellectually
Why should
dishonest.
we expect a lot from, for God's sakes, Faisal, you've got 3rd generation, 4th generation coming in. It's a matter of right, we got rotten boroughs.
Yeah.
I mean, these kids from landed families or whatever, politically influential families, they think they can walk into parliament.
I'm not even talking about that.
They think they can walk into parliament.
I'm talking about some of the technocrats that have been elected to the Senate, not to the parliament.
But that's also that's a charade.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as that's a charade.
They shouldn't be going there if they're not going to make a difference.
Because they're elected through provincial governments on the basis of party politics.
Yeah,
right?
so sure.
I mean, we should have a direct election for
Elections of the Senate.
Why do we have an outmoded system of secondary elections? Why don't we have direct elections for the Senate?
Yes.
Right? And thirdly, why is
and we keep talking about the corruption in the Senate elections and saying senators,
we know that they are bought.
Yeah.
And who will buy them? I can't buy a seat. Can you buy a seat?
No.
It has to be the rich people. How do they get rich? They have to do that. So it's a feedback effect. It's a loop. If I am not corrupt, I can't buy a seat. If I buy a seat, I have to be corrupt. So it's the same thing.
I've got to make the money back.
So somewhere along the line, we must begin to talk about these things.
So Doc, your political reforms, right? So we need those political reforms. I know we've said, okay, we're going to discuss this.
We need political reforms. We need administrative reforms, we need legal reforms, we need judicial reforms, we need educational reform, we need to make reform a buzzword for the next 100 years.
True.
We need to make a reform, a total buzzword. And you come from the tech innovative sector. Hey, we need to hasten up the speed of reform because everything is speeding up. If everything is speeding up, how can we be slow?
Let me share something with you. Right. So I'm involved with two data analytic companies. Right. So one of them went out. They do data analytics for smart fleet management, smart retail, and all that. And multinational clients, right? They don't want transparency. So we failed, right, to really make a mark here, and we had to go outside the country. That company is growing outside the country, not inside the country, because even multinationals do not want transparency in their operations, right? So there is a problem, right? Governance, right? If we are to improve governance, there's got to be free access to information. There's got to be better flow of information, which means we need to change the manner in which we record data, we keep data, we store data, we share data. So all those things. Should we have faith in our, would we have the census? The census is questionable. Suddenly everything is, all questions about the census.
Why are you just worried about numbers? Only because you have a data analytics company? We are a country that does not value information.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
We are a country that does not value anything. Take this, for example. Today, the Lahore pollution rate that I keep talking about, that we had a program on, does anybody care? Does anybody care that we are going to have, our population going to develop a high rate of cancer very soon?
Oh yes, of course.
So many ills. There's not a single person who's moved by that. I think we are the only people who did a show on that. I don't think any of the major anchors did a show on that.
No, they haven't.
The second thing is, you take corruption, for example. Who's actually sat down and thought about it? It's always, corruption, corruption happened, now we should kill somebody, do this. Nobody gets conceptually into anything. You see, our problem is this, that we are not a learning society.
Sure.
Data or information is appreciated in a learning society.
No, I'm coming from a different angle. I'm saying that even if the data is there, we do not want it, or we don't want access to it, because behind that, we do a lot of things. So we build this shield of opacity.
I think that's a good point.
Right?
I think that's a good point. But I think it's even worse, like the census has come out. Nobody's actually thought about it. Nobody's looked at it. For example, one thing that I said to you in an earlier program, I think we'll do a program on that. The census says we are only 52% urbanized.
Yes.
There's a researcher here in Lahore, we'll call him over. He has calculated through satellite data that we are 70% urbanized.
Yeah,
right?
I would agree with them.
Right? Now, we have...
This is where the problem lies.
Nobody was interested in that.
Because these numbers, I don't have faith in these numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I just don't have faith, because I cannot accept that, because if I go around, I see that urbanization is pretty visible.
But Faisal, I think I share your concern about not having faith, but there should be a secondary trigger too. One is your lack of trust in the numbers.
True.
But we should also have a secondary trigger. That, hey, I'm going to inquire into this.
Yes.
I'm going to think about it.
Sure, of course.
But somehow that doesn't seem to pervade a society.
Yeah, because I think
our society doesn't think like that.
We've been in a way lobotomized, right? So we're not thinking in that way.
I mean, corruption, for example, 117 we are on the transparency index. We are about 120 on the competitiveness index. Does it move us? Do we think about it? Do we talk about it? Does anybody look into it?
We're even worse when it comes to gender equality, opportunity, all those things. But to me, that is another form of corruption, right? Where patriarchal control, all those things are also happening. So we need to now, I think, let's try and encapsulate it in the next minute and a half or something. So where do we go? So what do we do? So one is, we need to have more discussions, more discourse. We need to ask more questions. If we feel that we don't have faith in the data that's been put in front of us, we go out and we seek data ourselves. We come up with at least some kind of policy frameworks and say, how do you reform your
institutions? We can develop our own measures.
So
our university system must be developing measures. Why rely only on transparency?
True.
We can develop new ideas, new thoughts on how to combat corruption. For example, right now, your mobile, we solved the problem of dengue using mobile phones. Can't we use information technology to understand corruption, etc.? There's so many ways. Can't we be innovative in thinking about things? So all I'm saying is, and I think this is where we agree, there's a reason to ask questions. Corruption sounds very simplistic, but once we get deeper into it, it's a very complex issue.
It is a complex
and we can come up with new ideas. But most important thing is, without reform, we'll never kill corruption.
So we're going to wind up over here. So we've talked about, yesterday we were talking about aid and its impact or its toxicity. What do we do with it? Where do we go with it? Today we were talking about corruption and what it does to institutions, what it does to governance structures, what it does to the nation. So these are subjects that we must all get involved in. We must ask questions. We must constantly debate. We must constantly look for answers. Keep on asking questions, keep on pushing on this, because it's not going to go away just because we want to wish it away. It's going to go away because we do something to make it go away. So we're going to catch you again next Saturday. Merry Christmas again, right, to those who are going to be celebrating. So
thank you.
We come
Merry
back.
Christmas to you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.